I was adopted at birth. I didn't feel abandoned per se, but I wanted the answers. And I just searched for her name online. And within 2 days of searching for just the name, I found her. I did find out I was conceived from rape and incest when she prosecuted her own father, but I was the only survivor of the 6. It opened my eyes to the beauty and the sacredness of every life.
If a woman is abused, does that mean that she can have an abortion, no questions asked? Well, many in politics say that that should be the case, but our next guest, Kristi Hofferber, is a living example of why that may not be the case. Many times they talk about these so-called exceptions to abortion and that we have to carve out this somehow 1% or 0.5% that say that, well, they aren't worthy. They can't have protections. Well, here on our program, we're going to talk to a living example, Kristi Hofferber, who was conceived in rape. Her mother, in fact, was raped numerous times, both rape and incest, and sexually assaulted many times, but she survived. Kristi survived and was eventually adopted, and so she has an incredible story to tell. Now she's a pregnancy center director and is doing amazing pro-life work every single day and bringing dignity to the human person. And so we are so excited to have Kristi Hofferber on the program today. Please welcome her on Living Pro-Life. Well, we are so excited to have Kristi Hofferber with us today. Kristi, thanks for being on the program.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, Kristi, I know that we've got some history. You used to work for us here at Coalition Life, and God was calling you to do some bigger and better things. And I know you've got a huge backstory, but before we get into that, tell us what you're doing now. You're sitting there in your office, and I know you got some big things you started doing lately.
Yes, I'm currently at a Beacon of Light Pregnancy Help Center in Maryville, Illinois, as the CEO. And one of our most recent additions is a nurse on our staff. So I am no longer the only staff at ABL, which is short for Beacon of Light. So that's exciting. And she's getting ready to go through her nurse training. And that way we can offer ultrasound just at the drop of a hat. When somebody walks through the door, we're ready to go.
And just for some of our audience who don't quite know why it's important at a pregnancy center to have an ultrasound, tell us why that is.
If a mom sees an ultrasound, then she is much more likely to choose life. She's actually looking at her baby inside of her womb. And so we want to be able to offer that. Now, our goal is to determine viability, and we're also looking for measurements to see how far along she is. But at the same time, she's getting a view that she may not have gotten otherwise. And so that can be very critical in helping her to understand the situation in a bigger picture.
I believe there's some 3,000 to 4,000 pregnancy centers around the country, depending on how you count them. What makes the work that you guys are doing important in Southern Illinois?
We are, in our location, surrounded by 2 very well-known abortion facilities, and to be offering support outside of what they're offering right by where they are is truly something that I value, and I know a lot of others value also, because they need other options and they need other resources. And being right here in Southern Illinois, we're actually located right between the 2 facilities here. So it's very, I would say, critical to be close to where they are so that we can help them find other options that are life-saving and life-affirming options.
One of the things I find incredibly interesting is that almost everyone I have spoken to who work in the pro-life movement, they have a story, something that really had brought them into the pro-life movement, whether they've had an abortion of their own or there's some other kind of circumstances that brought them into the pro-life movement. So I know you have a very special story. So could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, certainly. I'll share a little bit of my own background and where that led me, and how I got to actually be where I am today and to be so passionately pro-life. I was adopted at birth, and that's exactly where my story started, although I didn't know it for quite some time. That has deeply shaped who I am today. Not only am I adopted, my entire immediate family is also adopted. So my husband and both of our children are all adopted. And it wasn't until I became a young adult that I found a strong desire to know more about my roots. Why was I adopted? Who did I look like? Those are questions that had always resonated with me, but I really didn't share that with very many people. And so it was at a certain point in my life that I knew God was calling me to follow that path, to open that door, and it profoundly changed my life. In the process of that, it opened my eyes to the beauty and the sacredness of every life. And as I continued to discover where I came from, I would come to learn that my birth mother was abused, and that's how I came to be. In fact, there were 6 pregnancies in total, and 4 of those pregnancies, she was forced to abort in order to cover the actions of her abuser. 1 was a forced miscarriage, and then I was the 6th, not in that order, but I was the only survivor of the 6.
Wow.
I didn't know that until I was a young adult, and I'm thankful I didn't, because honestly, how does anyone, even at that point, how does anyone take that in? So it was a very difficult situation, but it was through that I truly became so passionately pro-life. And through the reunion, I did search for my family and reunited, and that was also another huge transition in my life.
So tell me about adoption, generally speaking. Women we speak to in the pregnancy centers and also just generally in our community, and they say, well, I could never do that. I could never, quote, give up my baby for adoption. Of course, we would rather call it, selecting other parents for your child with open adoption and all of these things. But what would you say about adoption, generally speaking? Do you feel lost? Do you feel abandoned? How do you feel as someone who has been adopted?
I would say that's changed, actually, through my journey in reuniting. So initially growing up, I knew I was adopted since I was a young child. My parents never hid that from me. Growing up, I did struggle with it. I always felt like no one that I know understands. I'm sure someone else does, but I wasn't surrounded by those people. I didn't know those people yet, I should say. So I did struggle with that. And it wasn't until going on a mission trip is what changed my opinion on, okay, we're going to find answers. We're going to, look at adoption from another perspective. And so I went on that mission trip and came home in pursuit of searching for my birth family, not just to get answers, but to understand all of the questions that I now know many adoptees have. So I didn't feel abandoned per se, but I wanted the answers as to why was I placed for adoption?
Yeah.
Why couldn't my birth family raise me?
So when you found your family, did you also find your mother, or tell me about that?
Yeah, that's an interesting story, I should say. So I came home from that mission trip, and I had only had a name. I knew a name, that was it. First and last, no middle. And I thought, okay, this is like finding a needle in a haystack. Is this really ever going to happen? And I came home and I just searched for her name online. And within 2 days of searching, I was working full time. So I was doing this on my few evening hours and searching for just the name. I found her. There was no question. Aside from I had short hair, she had long hair, I was looking in a mirror.
Wow.
And there was no denying, there was no question. And then it took a little longer for me to actually reach out because I didn't want to disrupt her life.
Yeah.
And I did find out before reaching out to her that I was conceived from rape and incest. And I found that out because the same way I had her name, it's not supposed to be provided in the closed adoption, and it accidentally was. And when she prosecuted her own father for the many, many years of abuse, it was published in the local newspaper. And my adoptive family saw the name and then saw what also matched her parents' names on the record they were provided with. So yeah, that happened. That took place when I was 13.
Wow.
And I didn't come to know any of this until years and years later.
For as long as I have known you, you have always been a staunch pro-life advocate. You're out speaking and you tell your story. I'm sure there was a moment where, okay, I have this story, and you thought, well, maybe I should start sharing it. So tell me about when you decided, hey, I'm going to come out and share my story and start getting active in the pro-life movement.
It was interesting because, again, growing up, I was very shy. I never did public speaking. In fact, I avoided it at all costs. I didn't want any part of it. But in going through this journey that I knew God had called me on, He also gave me a voice. And that's what I learned about 2 years after my reunion with my birth family. I was at a pregnancy resource center fundraiser a few states away, and I actually drove to this fundraiser specifically to hear the speaker. It was another speaker who had been conceived in rape. And I knew at that point that I was meant to be right where I was to hear what she had to say. And after the event, I had the chance to speak with her for a few minutes, and she encouraged me. And then she said, well, have you ever thought about sharing your story? And I was actually at this event with my birth mother.
Wow.
And yes, so it was truly, truly put together by God. I know that for certain. And I would say the first time I spoke was a few months after that event at just a very small pregnancy resource center fundraiser, not quite like this one. This was actually a formal banquet, but the other one that I spoke at was more of a panel. There were several of us that I had met through this speaker, and I had the opportunity to speak on a panel and share my story. And that first time that I did, I think there were 2, maybe 3 individuals that came up to me after that and said, you really opened my eyes and changed my heart to look at life from a different perspective and not hold exceptions as many do.
Right.
And so that was so reassuring and comforting to me that I knew I had to keep going.
So here you are, you're sharing your story, you're working at a pregnancy center, you and, God willing, another person, along with, I'm sure, incredible volunteers. One of the things that we know in the pro-life movement is that our volunteers are the lifeblood of what makes all of this happen. What advice do you have for anyone who is hoping to get involved with the pro-life movement? Maybe they have a story to share, maybe something like your story, maybe something a little bit different. What would you tell them about what they should do or how they should get involved?
The first thing I would say to that is don't be discouraged. And let me preface why I say that. So I've been doing pro-life work and advocacy now. It's been 15 years. And when I first started, I was discouraged. I thought, who's going to want to listen to me? I'm one voice. Who is going to really understand? Because not many people understand what it's like from this perspective. And so a lot of people, I would say, both in and out of the pro-life movement have what I consider to be misguided compassion. And they will hold exceptions. And that was my true stumbling block, I think, is to learn that a lot of people in the pro-life movement will hold exceptions.
Hold exceptions. What do you mean? Tell me more about that.
If there's a case of rape or incest, then they would be okay if a woman aborted her child in that regard. And so I see my mission is to not only educate both outside of the pro-life movement, but also in the pro-life movement to the value of every life. And with misguided compassion, you're looking at the woman's situation, but there are really 2. It's both the woman and her child.
Right.
And so helping them understand that child's life has value, and that value was not determined by how they were conceived. That's truly what I would say is keep going. Don't get discouraged. And don't lose heart if you have, something that takes place that really is discouraging. And in your journey in the pro-life movement, don't get discouraged. Keep going. Keep sharing your voice, because you're not only a light for one person, you're shining God's light, and He will do the rest.
Tell us about your pregnancy center again and the work that you're doing there. And if someone wants to get involved with you and the work you do, how can they get involved?
Certainly. So we have a lot of different opportunities at our pregnancy center in terms of volunteering. So we have events, multiple events throughout the year, fundraisers, ultrasound training. That is the most pertinent, but that will be completed, I believe, in the next couple weeks. So the best way to get involved is probably to contact us in regard to working at either our boutique, or if you're wanting to work with clients to become a client advocate. That's something that we truly need, is individuals who are willing to not be afraid of that, because it can be a very challenging thing. However, it is extremely rewarding, not for yourself, but for those that we serve. They need people to be advocates and to give them their true options and let them see that they have support.
We are with Kristi Hofferber, and we are so glad you're here. One last question for you. If people want to learn about those who were conceived in rape or incest, or the so-called exceptions, I know there's quite a few people out there speaking loudly about how it's important that we bring dignity to those who are many times, in whether it's legislation or whether it's in our conversation, like, quote, thrown to the side. Tell us how we could get involved with that. If we're going to be searching, what would we be searching for?
Well, exceptions are, as you know, throughout the country in various bills, legislation. So that, in fact, is one of my goals, is to become more visible with educating, and not just educating individuals, but I would really like to be able to educate centers on how to work with these moms who come in who are facing this situation, and they need resources to turn to as well. So finding the local resources that, I guess there are several, depends on where you are, but nationally there is a hotline. I don't have that right here with me, but there is a hotline that you can search for under conceived in rape, and then just getting involved locally to find out what resources are close to you.
Well, Kristi, we are incredibly glad that you were able to join us. I know you have an incredibly busy schedule, but you're able to squeeze us in here today. So thank you for being on the program, and thank you for your incredible pro-life work.
Thank you. It was great to be here.